today we're going to do some pretty cool stuff. We're going to talk about cancer. We're going to talk about cancer in depth, I hope. We're going to go through what cancer is, what can cause cancer, what you can do about cancer. We're going to talk about cancer from all different angles. But I want to thank, again, our very important sponsors, TrueMedix Nutrition. So if you're familiar with myself or my wife, Cynthia, you'll know that we have a brand company where we have our intellectual property that we have around supplements. We put in a brand company called TrueMedix. So if you go to www.truemedix.com, you're going to see all kinds of life-changing supplements that will help you in a variety of different ways. So go check out TrueMedix Nutrition. There's lots of good stuff up there. We're going to be talking about, I think we'll be talking about some of the herbs and things that will help with cancer that are in the TrueMedix line through the course of today's presentation. The other thing that we do is neighborly nutrition. So if you're in the Ada, America area, or even in Dallas or Oklahoma City or Tulsa, come see us. We do consultation. We do health consultation. We have diagnostic testing. There's non-medical, but it is diagnostic. So we can test you with a thermal imaging camera. We can test you with bioresonance. And then we use those tests to kind of baseline you, and then we can help you manage your health with supplements, with pharma, with kind of any way you want to do it. So that's what we do. Anyway, today we're going to talk about cancer, and we're going to talk about cancer pretty in depth. So let me pop over here to my other screen real quick, and we'll dive right in. So what is cancer? Well, that's a big, broad topic, I'll say. So if you just put in Google what is cancer, you're going to get a mishmash of all different kinds of answers, ranging from mutated cells to bacteria to just all different kinds of things. But at its core, what happens in cancer is, you can see this up here at the left, cancer-causing agents. So this could be environmental. This could be things like radiation, or in some cases the sun, although the sun helps us more than it hurts us, or like lead, or some kind of radiation or whatever. But anyway, that could be environment. So this could be diet. So there are certainly things that I could feed you that will be cancer-causing agents. They may not give you cancer, but they're cancer-causing agents. They will, in the right circumstances, let's say, give you cancer, which we'll talk about. And then there's also pathogens. So we know that things like H. pylori and, there's bugs, let's say, that can cause this to happen. But basically what happens is that DNA gets damaged. And it gets damaged in a cell, and it gets repeatedly damaged in cells. And basically the cleanup mechanisms, the anti-oncology mechanisms in cells can become damaged or broken. And so this continues, and these cells end up with bad DNA, which gets proliferated to other cells and gets passed along. So, and again, what is a cancer cell? Well, cancer has these characteristics, okay? So a cancer cell, and again, it takes a while to build up, let's say, enough cancer cells to be detrimental. It takes several mutations of a cell before cells can really become, cancerous and really cause us harm. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail later, about what we can do to basically cause the cleanup mechanisms inside of our cells to cycle faster, so we don't have the opportunity for cells to mutate, 5 or 6 times. But let's walk through this real quick. So a cancer cell has to be able to avoid immune destruction, right? So it has to be able to avoid your immune system. It has to be able to understand enough about your immune system to avoid it. It has to be able to enable replicative immortality. So a cancer cell will just constantly divide, reproduce, and it doesn't work like normal cells. So in a normal cell, there's little stops, before a cell will get ready to reproduce its DNA. There's a stop while it's producing its DNA. There's a stop before it divides. there's a stop during division. So, but all of those are gone in a cancer cell. It's just, there's no stops. It's just going to divide, mutate, divide, mutate, divide, mutate. So the other thing that a cancer cell has to do is activate invasion and metastasis. So a cell, one cell by itself is not a village, right? And cancer really wants to be a village. So it has to invade surrounding tissues and begin to pass along its mutation to other cells. So it needs to induce angiogenesis, which means that it's got to have a blood supply. So that means that it's got to basically turn up the blood vessel machine, you know, in its microenvironment. It has to resist cell death, and they're really good at doing that. It's kind of hard to kill cancer cells or for your body to kill cancer cells. You have to, you know, again, change the environment back. The environment that this cancer is trying to change, you have to change back. So the cancer cells deregulate cellular energetics. So again, it's your metabolism is going to be different. You're going to be stuck over here in glucose mode, or if you are oxidative phosphoryzing, that'll be funky. It won't be like it would be in a normal cell. So it's a cancer cell is going to sustain proliferative signaling. So if I want a cell to grow, if I want a cell to move and expand, I need to hit it with growth factors, and those could be vascular growth factors, those could be like oxygen, you know, growth factors, but I need to hit it with some kind of growth factor. And so all cancer cells will have proliferative signaling, you know, turned on. There's growth suppressors that we all have. So again, the cancer cell has to evade those. It has to possess genome instability and mutation. So again, it's going to be unstable, right? It's not going to be normal like a normal cell. And then it has to mediate a tumor-associated inflammatory response. So it has to basically control the inflammation or lack of inflammation in its little microenvironment. And these guys do all of that, which is pretty crazy. So this is something, this next slide, so, and I apologize for you guys that are listening on the road, so I'll try to describe these slides as best as I can, but what we're looking at now is a graph, and it's a graph that's basically showing the number of cells in things. So I've got an elephant, and I've got a human, and I've got a mouse up here, and so, you know, a mouse has fewer cells and lives less time than a human or an elephant. A human would have more cells than a mouse, would live a little bit longer. An elephant has more cells than a human or a mouse and lives longest of all of us, or about the same as a human, I guess. But the thinking is this, that again, if cancer is just mutated cells, right? So if it's just a mutation of cells, well, then elephants who have way, way, way more cells than a human or a mouse should have a lot higher incidence of cancer than a human or a mouse. Well, and it just doesn't work that way. So elephants hardly ever get cancer, and mice are super susceptible to cancers, as are humans. And the reason for this really doesn't have to do with the number of cells. It has to do with a couple of different things, which we're going to talk about, I think, next. But our ability to basically produce genes or, you know, let's say enzymes that deal with cancer type processes. So an elephant has like 20 of those, and we have one. So we just have one. Now, the other thing that I want you to look at over here on the left, and again, on the left of this graph, it's showing mitochondrial dysfunction. So kind of the more susceptible you are to cancer, the more your mitochondria will be dysfunctional. And this is very, very important. To me, this is the most important thing about this whole talk, is the tie-in between mitochondrial function or dysfunction and cancer. Because there's no question that cancer is directly related to mitochondrial dysfunction. Okay, well, your body has two ways to basically help us not get cancer. So one is something they call proto-oncogenes, and so those are genes that are going to help us not go into like a cancerous situation. And then the other ones are tumor suppressor genes. So if we are in a cancerous type situation, what genes can be expressed that will help us basically not express more tumor type genes. And so there's a balance between the proto-oncogenes. So again, we need some kind of oncoactivity, let's say, and then the tumor suppressor genes. So that's kind of a balance. So those genes play a balance. Again, if something's on, then something else will be off to balance that or offset that, so that there's a nice static balance. Well, what happens in cancer is that those genes get mutated. And so what could happen is that you've got too many proto-oncogenes, and then that was going to promote cancer. So that's going to be like stepping on the gas. And then you may also have a lot of your tumor suppressor genes inactivated, meaning that you can't fight the cancer if you have it. And so those are two kind of worst case scenarios, but that's exactly what happens in cancer. Okay, so what can cause this, right? So again, we have all these situations where we have these proto-oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes getting mutated. You've got this situation where we've really just kind of got one tumor suppressing situation where an elephant has a bunch. So what can cause this? What can kind of kick off this situation, this DNA damage? Well, we're going to look at a couple of different ways, but one is pathogens. And so what pathogens can cause mutation, let's say, in these tumor suppressing genes? Well, it turns out something called H. pylori can do that. And H. pylori is a cancer causing bacterium. So pylori will cause cancer, and he interestingly does also have the ability to modify some of these tumor suppressing genes. Mycoplasm is something that we see, we bioresonance people, so I have the ability to kind of look inside you, which is kind of cool. And I see mycoplasm in a lot of people. And again, mycoplasms can be cancerous. So they can modify that P53 gene, and they can begin to cause things to happen. There are viruses, so human T cell lymphotropic virus type 1, HTLV1, will do it. Again, and there's lots of things that pathogens will modify those particular sets of genes, and that's one of the ways that they're able to hijack us. So are there foods that modify? Yeah, there's foods that help, so again, P53, which we'll talk about in a lot more detail here in a second, but P53 is a gene that it is our cancer defense gene. It is our tumor suppressing gene, and we really kind of only have one. We have others that help it, but we really only have one. And again, an elephant will have like 20, and that's why they don't have the same incidence of cancer that we do, but we only have one gene that helps us suppress cancer. And it turns out that this gene does get modified by a lot of pathogens. It can be modified under certain DNA circumstances. But one of the things that helps it is cruciferous vegetables. So cruciferous vegetables helps P53. Galicachin can help P53, so an antioxidant found in green tea. The other thing that really helps P53 is antioxidants. So just watch this. So, antioxidants and P53. And so P53 induces a group of antioxidant genes, including all those guys. So again, P53 is going to be really tied to oxidation antioxidants. But the big thing is with cancer, it's getting modified. So, and it's only going to get modified in that microenvironment. It's not like it gets modified everywhere. If it got modified everywhere, we'd get cancer all over us, and we don't. We just get cancer in the microenvironments. So those microenvironments are a war of, these bugs and these basically your own system kind of fighting against you and trying to modify P53. But generally there's a cause of that, right? So there's a radiation cause, there's a environmental cause, there's a pathogenic cause for that to be happening, for you to kind of be stuck in that way. This is just talking about sex differences in cancer metabolism, and there are certainly sex differences in cancer metabolism. So I've had a good graph in here, so give me just a second. Let's see if we can find it. Yeah, well, we'll skip over this. Oh, yeah, here we go. So again, there are sex differences. This is not that's too specific of what I wanted to show you. That's way too specific of what I wanted to show you. But there are sex differences in cancer. And again, cancer is tied to estrogen, cancer is tied to a lot of sex hormones, and so that makes sense. Um, this is just incidence of cancer. So, what is the, let's say, most prevalent cancer? And it turns out that that is lung cancer. So, if you look down here, so you've got half as much of a chance of forming liver cancer than you do of lung cancer. You got half as much of a chance of forming liver cancer than you do breast cancer. Breast cancer and liver cancer are pretty close as far as incidence. So that's 2 every 2 million people. I think it's actually higher than this. Yeah. Yeah, here we go. 5.3% of women will get breast cancer. So this, if you want to know percentages of all cancers, 22% of men are going to get some kind of cancer. 18% of women are going to get some kind of cancer. Then you can kind of see how these break out over the course of those statistics. But 3% is pretty dang high for prostate cancer and for lung cancer in men. 5% is super duper high, for breast cancer in women. For women, really, you don't have, you've got cervix and thyroid, but those are your biggest cancers: colon, breast, thyroid, and cervix. So anyway, that's incidence and percentages and all that. Alrighty, moving right along. So what can we do if we have cancer? Are there things that we can do, and like I'm talking about, like behavior, diet, supplements, and then medicines that we can actually take to help us with our cancer, or do that we can help us with our cancer? Well, it turns out that if you go out and do a little bit of research on your own, just look at fasting and cancer, intermittent fasting and cancer. And if you've ever heard me talk before, you've heard me talk a lot about intermittent fasting and this cellular switch. It's called AMPK that flips. So in a fasted state, we're burning fat, we're oxidatively phosphorizing. In kind of a fed state, a degraded state, we're burning glucose. When we're burning fat over glucose, we're 50 times more powerful. And the other thing that happens when we sort of flip over to glucose mode, we, for the most part, turn off P53, and P53 is our one way to suppress tumors, okay? So we don't want that guy off, we want him on. And this is why fasting is so important with cancer, or intermittent fasting minimally. And it helps basically your body defeat the cancer. It gives you so many more weapons. It gives your body so many more weapons to kind of defeat the cancer. But let's walk this through a little bit. So again, if you're fasting in normal cells, what happens is these pathways get turned down, and mTOR is a good pathway that we want turned down. So we want all of these things to happen. These are all very beneficial. And cancer has to have mTOR turned up. So anything that we can do to turn down mTOR and RAS and AKT, we want to, because these are the cancer pathways. Again, in a tumor cell, these are going to be turned up. So AKT, RAS, and mTOR are going to be turned up. Cell growth is going to be pegged. So basically, it's these tumor cells are growing as fast as they can with no real governor or boundaries on them. Again, in a normal cell, that's not what happens. So you have lessened cell growth, you have higher maintenance. In a cancer cell, you have no maintenance and high cell growth. So let's look at what fasting does here. So what fasting does is it lowers IGF-1, it lowers glucose, it lowers insulin. It increases IGF-BP, and it increases ketone bodies. So all of those things have been shown to be beneficial to helping your body kind of get out of or pop out of a cancer situation. This is a tough thing to do, though. I remember I had a situation where I was trying to help a family with a little girl who had brain glioma. So it's about the most serious thing you can have in a child, and it's pretty much a death sentence. We have had children recover, but we have had also children not recover. So and she was not making progress. She was making some progress, but she was going the wrong way. Let's just put it that way. But, kind of the last hope, for them was really fasting her. And, how hard is it to fast your child, who's dying of cancer, right? And so they chose not to do that. That was just too much for them. But again, there is a lot of evidence to say that fasting will help, and it will help in even the most severe and extreme circumstance and situation. Oh, I've got that a little bit more of a knockout graphic there. There's the same graphic again. If you're listening, then you don't see anything. So you're just listening to me talk. You didn't see anything. Everything was perfect. There were no flaws in the presentation at all. All right, so what else contributes? Well, amino acids. So it's like the biggest things kind of that are most important to cells, which is fuel, glucose versus fatty acids. Those get disrupted. And all of fatty acid processing, lipid processing gets disrupted in cancer. The second most important things to cells are amino acids, and again, these get disrupted in cancer processing. So you've got just a big disruption of cells in every way almost possible for a cell to be disrupted. But the biggest thing that happens in cancer is something called ROS, or reactive oxygen species. And so if your mitochondria are functioning normally, again, you're not going to have a lot of ROS. You're not going to have a lot of reactive oxygen species. As your mitochondria become degraded, and again, what degrades mitochondria? Well, DNA damage, the same stuff that we're talking about, the same stuff that causes cancer, will degrade a mitochondria. And as a mitochondria becomes degraded, there's 4 reactions in a mitochondria. So if any one of those get flawed, again, that mitochondria is going to be degraded. It's going to begin to produce reactive oxygen species. And depending on where it's breaking and where it's sort of breaking down, this reactive oxygen species will be different, okay, different. Some could be hydrogen peroxide-like, some could be just oxygen derivatives, some could be just hydrogen derivatives, but they're going to be there. Okay, so reactive oxygen species help with we know, like if a cell begins to produce ROS, you're going to have a response to that ROS throughout that microenvironment, let's say. And cells understand when other cells are producing ROS, and so they begin to build some defense against ROS, and they begin to do some things to protect themselves, let's say, against ROS, because ROS can be damaging to cells. So that's what we're kind of seeing here. Now, always with the kind of the worse and more severe the cancer is, the worse and more severe the RS levels will be. All right, so cancer is absolutely tied to this. So it's very important to understand oxidative stress, oxidative balance, what is basically reactive oxygen species, and how do we counteract that with antioxidants, okay? Super duper important. Again, everybody should be looking at glutathione. Everybody should be looking at vitamin E, vitamin C. Those are the things that help us with ROS and too much oxidative stress. A little bit of oxidative stress is good for us. It actually helps us. It'll kill bacteria. Okay, so how does ROS play into the cancer story? Well, up at the top here on A, and again, I apologize if you're listening at home for the graphics, but what we've got is a balance. So we've got a balance on normal scales, and we've got pro-oxidant inducers on one side of the balance, and we've got antioxidant inhibitors on the other side of the balance. And again, in a normal cell situation, when we sort of throw on redox, that balance is able to balance itself between antioxidants and pro-oxidants. In cancer, this gets completely whacked out. So we've got basically a big redox imbalance, and we've got too much ROS production. So we've got way too many ROSs being produced over how many antioxidants we can produce to fight those. So again, if we supplement with antioxidants, does that help this picture? Absolutely does. So something that's important in cancer is to make sure that we are taking enough antioxidants. Some of you might recall there was a clinic in Mexico that actually cured people of cancer using vitamin C, and vitamin C is a huge antioxidant. But, so there's been a lot of sort of pinging around, let's say, these ideas, and a lot of good benefit from, just one or two ideas, let alone all of them. But we'll talk about all of them kind of at the end. All right. So what else gets involved in kind of this ROS situation with cancer? Well, it turns out your endocannabinoid system does. And your endocannabinoid system really does at the point of arachidonic acid, which gets sucked up really into a COX-2 expression under some of these more severe diseases, including cancer. So you'll look down here on the right, inflammation and neoplasia. Neoplasms are cancer, so in the literature you'll see neoplasm, that just means cancer. Neoplasia means, cancer-like tissue. So you can see here COX-2 is responsible for prostaglandins that control tumor invasion, angiogenesis, cell proliferation, macrophages, and synctiovites. So COX-2 is definitely involved in this picture. COX-2 is involved in most disease and disease pathology. Inhibiting COX-2 can be a beneficial thing to do. You want to do that carefully. Because if you inhibit COX-2, again, all this crap that COX-2 is trying to mitigate still is around. So you don't want that to happen either. COX-2 is kind of part of your detox mechanism. Okay. This is back to, so now we're into kind of things that you can do. And again, we talked a little bit about fasting and what that does, but this is a study in Science Translational Medicine, or an article, and it says fasting cycles retard growth of tumors and sensitize a range of cancer cell types to chemotherapy. So you're going to be able to kill them easier, and you're going to retard their growth by fasting. This is the conclusion of this study. Although clinical trials testing the effect of fasting in cancer treatment are still in the early stages, they suggest that fasting cycles may boost the efficacy of chemotherapeutic agents and could be as effective as chemotherapy drugs in the killing of specific tumor cells. So, fasting could be as effective as chemotherapy drugs. Wow, should be a wowzer for a lot of us. A lot of us think, oh, well, fasting, that will be, eating supplements, and fasting won't be as powerful as chemotherapy that comes from pharma. Well, again, this study found that it was, so could be as effective as chemotherapy drugs in the killing of specific tumor cells. Pretty good result there. All right, so what else helps with cancer? So definitely if you have cancer, you need to look at fasting and intermittent fasting. Again, fasting is better. Intermittent fasting should be a minimum for you. That's going to give your body, kind of set your body up with the necessary horsepower it needs to defeat the cancer. The second thing that you can do is begin to give your body some things that will help it actually fight the cancer. And one of the things that has been shown to really help fight cancer over the last 5 years or so are this class of drugs called antihelmintics. And antihelmintics are drugs that are drugs that will basically help you kill hookworm and pinworms, tapeworms, things like that. So those are helminths are hookworm and pinworms and tapeworms, and there's a whole class of drugs that go with these guys. Now, ivermectin is in that class of drugs, so we've all heard about ivermectin and its ability to help with things like COVID. Ivermectin is also a very powerful cancer fighter and will help with certain types of cancer. If you've ever heard me talk, you've heard me talk a lot about fenbendazole, which is a dog dewormer. It is in this class of drugs, and again, it also will help fight cancer. There are some studies on this. In fact, I pulled this from one of these studies. And in fact, some of these drugs have even been to clinical trials with certain types of cancers. So minimally, it doesn't hurt anyone. Let's say any normal person, can fast or intermittent fast. That's going to help you, not hurt you. And then to begin to supplement with these antihelmintics, again, is powerful. It's going to help, not hurt. We all need to deworm anyway, so 2 weeks of deworming isn't going to hurt anybody. And what we recommend here is ivermectin and fenbendazole. Again, if you can get it prescribed, menbendazole is the human version of fenbendazole, which is the animal version, but it's the same drug. It's the exact same drug. So, but you know, if you feel more comfortable taking a prescription, I guess you can get a doctor to prescribe you menbendazole rather than doing the horse paste, ivermectin, fenbendazole. But they both work the same and they both work equally well. But anyone who has cancer, again, I'd immediately suggest that you get on one of these antihelmintic drugs, and likely ivermectin or fenbendazole. Those have the most research behind them, and there's some pretty good stuff online about how to dose with them and all that. Peprazine pepperine is in black pepper. So this is why black pepper has some efficacy, you know, with cancer, and so you read about and see some black pepper studies and things like that. That is why. Okay, these are kind of how these guys affect and what they affect and the different types of cancer they'll go at. And you can see there's sort of menbendazole is the same as fenbendazole, so colorectal cancer, gastric cancer, liver cancer, pancreatic cancer. Albendazole has a little bit different mechanism of action, but it's kind of basically the same. But you can get an idea of kind of what these guys go at and the type of cancers that they help with. Ivermectin, again, so colorectal, gastric, what's CCA? Cholangiocarcinoma. So that's going to have to do with the bile ducts and gallbladder, likely. So that type of cancer. But anyway, you can get an idea of these antihelmintics and what they do as to cancer. And they are very powerful. So fasting, you know, you can do on your own. Antihelmintics, you can get at Tractor Supply. So these aren't hard to get. I think you can get $10 of ivermectin, which is about 10 doses, you know, so it's inexpensive. It doesn't cost a lot. There is an ivermectin and fenbendazole together in the horse paste. So if you do have cancer, that would be a kind of a way to swing two bats, if you will, at the same ball. And wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing to do. Okay, so what else can help with cancer? I mean, and we know, I'm leaving out oncology, so I'm leaving out pharma. Again, if you want to be treated that way, go be treated that way. There's lots of good cancer therapies now. If you have breast cancer, you know, they've got that knocked down to the incidence of that actually killing you is very, very, very low now. So they are making progress all the time in pharma, and I'd suggest that you throw the book at cancer. If you have cancer, I mean, you need to be fasting, you need to be looking at your diet, you need to be properly supplementing, you need to be taking these antiparasitics, you need to be looking at cannabis as a solution, and you really need to be managing kind of what you eat and what goes in your diet. There are supplements that will help with cancer. Anything that flips this AMPK switch, which is kind of I'm burning fat here and I'm burning glucose here in a cell, anything that flips that switch is going to really help with cancer. And so resveratrol, eligachin, there's lots of things that'll flip that switch. THC flips that switch. So lots of things that'll flip that switch that will help with cancer. And again, this is what we do, and why, you know, it'd take me forever to go through every single thing that helps with cancer, but that's what I do. Like if you consult with me about your cancer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at your cancer and I'm going to look at the best ways that we can attack that cancer. And again, it's different depending on where it is, what tissues it's in, and all that. Give you a kind of a protocol, if you will, and then have you get to it and get after it and beat your dang cancer. So, but there's a little bit more to it than, you know, take this pill, or, oh, we're going to have you on chemo for a while and then you'll be better. There's a lot more you can do to help yourself. Let's just put it that way. Okay. And again, if you have questions about this, I'm constantly talking about cancer. It's a major thing in my world, but all of these diseases, I was trying to explain this to someone earlier today, but I'm a mathematician and a programmer. You know, that's sort of how what I initially learned to do, and I'm very comfortable with those concepts and doing those type of things. But in programming, you have this concept called the logic gate, okay? And so you'll ask a question, if, then, else, let's say question. And depending on the answer, a yes, no answer, then you'll have, other questions that you ask and other questions that you ask and other questions that you ask. And as you get down to the bottom of that gate, it could be super duper complex, right? There could be all these different outcomes based on the answers of these different questions. What I try to do is I try to work up that gate and figure out those most important questions to ask, okay? So cancer is kind of up there at the top if you look at kind of how cells go wrong and, what can go wrong with cells and what is this, let's say the symptoms of something happening that's really, really bad. Well, cancer is up there at the top, autism is up there at the top. And so I really study these things deeply, and when I'm studying something that I'm looking at, I can kind of compare and contrast back to cancer or autism or things that I know quite a bit about and kind of how they work. So anyway, if you guys know someone with cancer, if you have someone with cancer, if you have cancer, there's a lot of good a lot of good references on this website. So this is just our neighborly nutrition website. There's a lot of blogs out here that are very, very helpful, but in particular there's a cancer blog, which is what this is. And again, you can kind of drill into this more and get more information. That's really, really good. The other thing that I would point you to is I have done other podcasts on cancer, and so there's a way to do that and a way to look at those old podcasts. You can always get me to, if you can just click down here to ChipTalks, and then you can get over to ChipTalks, and you can, if you want to, you can book time with me if we need to talk about your cancer or someone in your family's cancer. Always love to do that. So anyway, there's lots of different types of cancer, let's say. Cancer can be in different cells. It's going to have a different look depending on the types of cells it's in. There's a lot of different things that can cause cancer. So environment can cause cancer, diet can cause cancer, pathogens can cause cancer. As we look at the cancer and we look at kind of where you are in the cancer progression, there's a lot of things that we can then begin to throw at, let's say, your body, a lot of diet behavior type things that you can do on your own that are really going to help you recover faster and recover better from the cancer. So again, fasting is the biggest tool. Fasting is the biggest tool to work your immune system that you have or I have. So God gave us this great tool called fasting. That's why it's in every single religion. Talks about fasting, talks about the importance of fasting. So that's why it's there. Again, it's our most important tool to kind of defend ourselves. So fasting is kind of the number one thing. Then past that, if we look at our diet, so there's definitely things that we can add to our diet to help us beat cancer. There's things that we can add to our diet to hurt us, so if you're eating a bunch of sugar and processed foods, that's going to hurt your ability to defeat cancer rather than help your ability to defeat cancer. So then we look at supplements. So are there things that we can take that will help our body get in a better sort of healing state for cancer? Absolutely, there are, and those look like antiparasitics, antihelminthics, fenbendazole, ivermectin, things like that. And then past that, are there natural products and natural supplements that we can take to help us with our cancer? Yes, absolutely. THC is a big one, so cannabinoids, cannabis is a big one. And again, that is something that it would take a long time to walk you through how to do that in this video. I do some of that, I think, in previous videos. So if you're interested in that, you might go back and check. But that's a conversation, and it depends on you, and it depends on what kind of cancer you have and where that cancer is. But let's just say if you're going to go the cannabis route, and again, you need to be doing everything else. You need to be fasting, you need to be taking the antiparasitics, you need to be watching what kind of foods you eat, and then you kind of pile these guys on top of that. But the cannabis route would, it depends. Again, it just depends on your cancer and where it is, and kind of how we're going to go at it and what we throw at it. But I will say it's debilitating. The THC route is you just plan on not doing anything for about 2 months because you'll need to be at home. You really can't drive. You know, you'll get to watch a lot of cartoons, let's put it that way. And then past that, now, you know, chemo and radiation. So all of these things you can do on your own that are really going to help you recover from cancer, regardless of whether you're in mainstream pharma or not, whether you're doing, you know, cancer and radiation and chemo or not, right? So there you go. Hope this has helped. I hope this has been informative. Again, always feel free to call us. That's what we do every day. We talk to people about their health problems. Love to hear from you guys. So love you. Hopefully you never have to watch this video. I wish that for you and all your loved ones. But if you do, hopefully it's helped. And that's what we're